February 9th, 2009. On a server deep inside Facebook's headquarters, a switch is flipped. A single line of code goes live, and a new feature appears on millions of pages worldwide.
Using things like wall posts and comments to express affirmation and positivity. And it dawned on me, I was like, well, what if we could make it easier? What if we could make it so that the effort required was so low, and eventually realized the lowest effort possible would be one click.
A small blue thumbs up icon. It seemed insignificant, an afterthought. It wasn't even their idea. It was a concept quietly borrowed from a tiny forgotten startup, designed by engineers who just wanted to solve a simple problem. The awkward silence of the internet. A way to give a nod of approval without having to type. But they had stumbled onto something they couldn't comprehend. It wasn't just a button, it was a psychological master key. A direct tap into the dopamine system that governs human motivation. They had accidentally found a way to quantify validation. And in doing so, they handed the new gods of the algorithm the only tool they would ever need to capture and hold our attention. This is the story of a ghost in the machine. A story of how a handful of programmers, with the best of intentions, accidentally found a master switch inside the human brain. How they created a button that would rewire our emotions, hijack our conversations, and hold a mirror up to the best and the very worst of human nature. Before the endless scroll, before the dopamine loop, the internet was a different country. The social web of the early 2000s was a landscape of deliberate and often clumsy creation.
Entering the digital landscape of 2006, it's impossible to overlook the buzz surrounding MySpace.
This was the kingdom of MySpace, where a user's personality was declared through glittering text, carefully chosen profile songs, and the all-important ranking of their top 8 friends. It was the world of AIM and MSN Messenger, where your status was a cryptic song lyric and conversations happened in staccato bursts. Connection in this kingdom had a cost, not a monetary cost, but a cost of effort. Communication was an active, conscious choice. If you appreciated a friend's vacation photo album on Facebook, you had to commit. You had to stop, think of something to say, and type it out for the world to see. The alternative was silence. There was no casual one-click nod of approval. Every interaction had weight. This friction created a natural barrier. The web was a place you visited, not a place you inhabited. It hadn't yet fused with our nervous systems. There was no public scoreboard for your thoughts, no instant tabulation of your popularity. The constant low-grade hum of social anxiety that permeates our lives today was largely absent. Life was simply lived, and then, later, perhaps, it was posted about. But a group of engineers, fresh from the data-drenched halls of Google, saw this friction not as a feature of a simpler time, but as a flaw in the system, a problem that, if solved, could change everything. Our story begins in 2007, not in a massive corporate campus, but in the archetypal Silicon Valley startup office. A small, cramped space filled with whiteboards, IKEA furniture, and the lingering smell of stale pizza. This was the headquarters of FriendFeed, a company founded by a group of brilliant ex-Google employees, including a quiet programmer named Bret Taylor. They were veterans of huge projects like Google Maps, and they were looking for their next challenge. FriendFeed's goal was both nerdy and noble, to create a universal inbox for your entire digital life. It aggregated everything, your blog posts, your Flickr photos, your tweets, your bookmarks, into a single unified stream. It was a powerful tool for information junkies, but it had a human problem. It was cold. People would see dozens of interesting items from their friends, but because commenting felt like such a high stakes, formal action, most of that interest went unexpressed. The vast majority of human connection was being lost in the silence. The friend feed team became obsessed with the problem. They called it asymmetrical engagement. For every person who left a comment, they knew 99 others felt something but had no easy way to show it. They needed to invent a lightweight, positive-only gesture of acknowledgement, a digital head nod. They experimented with different ideas. They considered star ratings, up and down arrows, plus signs, but all of it felt too much like grading. Then one of the engineers, Justin Rosenstein, mocked up a simple, clickable word. Awesome. The team loved the sentiment, but the word itself felt too casual, too much like teenage slang. They needed something more universal, more elemental. They debated, they argued, and they finally settled on a word of 4 letters. So simple it felt almost invisible. Like. In late 2007, with no grand announcement, the first ever like button went live on FriendFeed. It wasn't intended to be a revolution. It was a feature, a fix, a small piece of code designed to solve a small social problem on a small website. The architects had no idea they had just drafted the blueprint for a machine that would rewire the global psyche. For 2 years, the like button was a secret handshake among the tech elite who used FriendFeed. But 10 miles down the road in Palo Alto, the biggest social network on the planet was facing a crisis of its own. By 2009, Facebook had conquered the college campus and was rapidly expanding. But its growth in user engagement, the amount of time people spent clicking and interacting on the site, was starting to flatline. For a company singularly obsessed with growth, this was an existential threat. Facebook's internal growth team was tasked with solving this. They saw the elegant genius of FriendFeed's little button. It was a frictionless source of infinite engagement. Here was a way to get users to interact 10, 20, 100 times more often. The proposal to build their own version quickly made its way to the top. But the idea was met with fierce internal resistance. The debate was philosophical. Some of Facebook's most senior leaders, like Andrew Bosworth, argued that a one-click like would devalue the act of commenting, making the platform more shallow. Others, including Mark Zuckerberg, worried that a like button would inevitably lead to public demand for a dislike button, which he feared would flood the platform with negativity and conflict. The soul of the platform hung in the balance. But in the data-driven culture of Facebook, opinions were secondary to metrics. The growth team's projections were too powerful to ignore. Their models predicted a massive exponential increase in on-site activity. The potential for collecting more user data, for creating more advertising inventory, was astronomical. The debate was over before it really began. In the kingdom of Facebook, growth was God. On February 9th, 2009, Facebook launched its own like button. The effect was instantaneous and explosive. Within a year, it was being clicked billions of times per day. The engagement metrics soared beyond the most optimistic projections. The team at FriendFeed could only watch in awe as their quiet experiment, now plugged into the engine of a global giant, began to warp the fabric of the internet around it. The staggering success of the like button wasn't just a triumph of design, it was a triumph of unwitting psychological engineering. The button and the notification system built around it had accidentally created a perfect human-computer feedback loop, tapping directly into the brain's most primitive reward pathways.
Here's what I'm looking for self-validation, and I want it from my peers. But then I may not, this abstract thinking, what I do now can affect my future. Right. They're not always thinking about that.
Every time you post a photo, a thought, or a life update, you are, in essence, pulling the lever on a slot machine. The subsequent likes are the payout. Each red notification is a small jackpot, delivering a tiny hit of a powerful neurotransmitter called dopamine. It's the same chemical released when we eat delicious food, fall in love, or win a bet. It's the molecule of motivation and pleasure. But the system's true power lies in its unpredictability. You never know when the next like will arrive or who it'll be from. This is a powerful behavioral conditioning principle known as intermittent variable rewards. It's the single most effective schedule for reinforcing a habit. It's what keeps gamblers glued to slot machines for hours, pulling the lever again and again, chasing that uncertain but possible reward. The like button took this addictive casino mechanic and discreetly installed it into the daily lives of 1 billion people. A powerful subconscious cycle was created. Post something, check the phone for validation, get a small dopamine hit, feel the urge to check again. The desire for connection was slowly being replaced by a craving for validation. Life was no longer something to be lived and then shared. It was something to be performed, with the performance constantly being scored by a global, invisible audience. We had all been handed a scorecard for our own lives, and we couldn't stop checking the score. While users were becoming addicted to the dopamine loop, the platform's engineers were becoming addicted to the data it produced. The constant stream of likes was the richest, most detailed data set on human desire ever compiled.
So all of this data that we're just pouring out all the time is being fed into these systems that have almost no human supervision and that are making better and better and better and better predictions about what we're going to do and who we are.
It was a real-time map of what humanity found interesting, funny, shocking, and most importantly, engaging. It was the perfect fuel to train a new, more powerful kind of machine, the algorithmic feed. This was the most significant pivot in the history of the social web. The timeline, as a concept, was killed. Your feed was no longer an honest chronological record of what your friends were posting. It became a carefully curated reality, engineered by an artificial intelligence with a single overriding objective: to maximize your engagement, to keep your eyeballs glued to the screen for as long as humanly possible.
How much time can we get you to spend? How much of your life can we get you to give to us?
To achieve this, the algorithm began a relentless global A/B test. It showed different types of content to different people and measured the reaction, always optimizing for whatever generated the most likes, comments, and shares. It was a blind, unthinking creature, feeling its way towards whatever combination of words, images, and videos would keep the dopamine flowing. And in its cold, mathematical quest, it made a profound discovery about human nature. It learned that while we enjoy cute puppies and inspirational quotes, nothing engages us quite like a fight. The algorithm, without any human guidance or moral compass, discovered a fundamental truth. Outrage is the most powerful catalyst for engagement.
It may be the greatest thing ever created. Now imagine what that means in the hands of a dictator or an authoritarian. If you want to control the population of your country, there has never been a tool as effective as Facebook.
A post that makes you angry is far more likely to provoke a reaction. A like, an angry emoji, a furious comment, a share, than a post that makes you happy or thoughtful. Anger is a hot emotion. It demands action. This single discovery became the social web's original sin. The system began to systematically, automatically, and unintentionally favor and amplify the most divisive content. Misinformation, conspiracy theories, political propaganda, and posts that preyed on fear and tribalism began to outperform neutral, nuanced content. The platforms hadn't set out to become outrage machines, but their own code, in its ruthless pursuit of engagement, had built one anyway.
We've created a system that biases towards false information. Not because we want to, but because false information makes the companies more money than the truth. The truth is boring.
The consequences began to bleed from the digital world into the real one. Political discourse coarsened. The common ground of shared reality began to fracture as the algorithm sorted us into self-reinforcing echo chambers, feeding us content that confirmed our biases and painted the other side as monstrous. The tool that was meant to connect the world was now systematically tearing it apart, one angry click at a time. The simple like button had become the accelerator for our worst impulses. By the mid-2010s, the utopian dream of social media was dying, and the public was beginning to understand the cost of free connection. The bill was coming due, and it was horrifyingly steep. First came the mental health crisis. Researchers began to publish alarming studies linking heavy use of social media to skyrocketing rates of anxiety, depression, and body dysmorphia, especially among young women and girls. The endless performance, the compare and despair culture fueled by hyper-curated influencer posts, and the constant quantified social pressure of the like count were creating a generation riddled with self-doubt. Then came the geopolitical earthquake. In 2018, the world learned the name Cambridge Analytica. A massive data leak revealed that a political consulting firm had illicitly harvested the Facebook data of 87 million people.
This was a major breach of trust, and I'm really sorry that this happened. We have a basic responsibility to protect people's data, and if we can't do that, then we don't deserve to have the opportunity to serve people.
They use this data, specifically a user's profile information and their history of likes, to build frighteningly accurate psychological profiles, which were then used to target voters with manipulative, personalized political ads. This was the ultimate violation. The innocent clicks we had made over years, expressing our taste in movies, music, and causes, had been collected, analyzed, and weaponized to influence democratic elections. It was definitive proof that the machine we were feeding every day had turned against us. The backlash was immense. The tech founders who were once celebrated as visionaries were now grilled by lawmakers and decried as villains. The platform scrambled to contain the damage. They introduced new reaction buttons, giving users more ways to express emotion. In a stunning admission of the feature's toxicity, Instagram began experimenting with hiding public like counts altogether. But these were bandages on a gaping wound. The underlying engine, the algorithm optimized for pure engagement, was still running. And what became of the architects? The small team at FriendFeed that had started it all. In 2009, their company was acquired by Facebook for nearly $50 million. They were absorbed into the very machine that had supercharged their invention. Brett Taylor went on to have a legendary career in Silicon Valley, eventually becoming the chief technology officer at Facebook, and later the co-CEO of Salesforce, one of the most powerful figures in the tech industry. Others from the original FriendFeed team and the early Facebook growth team have since become vocal critics of the systems they helped build. Justin Rosenstein has openly spoken about the addictive nature of the like button. Leah Pearlman, a product manager on the Facebook team that launched it, wrote about her own complicated relationship with the validation it offered. The creators now watch as their simple idea, their elegant solution to a small problem, has mutated into a global force far beyond their control. The ghost of their code now haunts every corner of the internet. The logic of the like button has become the default logic of our culture. News articles are written with likable headlines.
Why do advertisers pay those companies? They pay in exchange for showing their ads to us. We're the product. Our attention is the product being sold to advertisers.
Products are designed to be Instagrammable. Politicians craft policies based on what will perform well online. Success itself has been redefined as quantifiable, viral popularity. The original intent, a quiet, positive nod, has been lost. It has been replaced by a global, relentless, and exhausting quest for more. More likes, more followers, more engagement, more validation. The small act of appreciation has been twisted into the gargantuan act of performance. The story of the like button is the story of a promise. The promise of a more connected, more open, more unified world. But it is also a cautionary tale about the perilous nature of good intentions in the age of infinite scale. The engineers at FriendFeed on Facebook weren't malicious. They didn't set out to create a system that would addict its users and polarize society. They were solving a puzzle. They saw a flaw in human communication and engineered a solution. But the solution proved to be too effective. It hacked a vulnerability not in computer code, but in human code. Our deep, ancient, and insatiable need for belonging and social approval. They built a tool, but they didn't account for the ghost in the machine. Us. Our insecurities, our tribalism, our vanity, our anger. The algorithm didn't invent these things. It simply discovered them and learned how to profit from them by holding up a mirror and reflecting our own nature back at us, amplified 1 billion times over. We are now living in the world that the like button built. It is a world that is more connected, yet feels more isolating. A world with more information, yet less shared truth. A world where everyone has a voice, but no one seems to be listening. The fight for the future is no longer just against governments or corporations. It's against the invisible code that runs in our pockets and in our minds. The question is no longer whether we can control the machine. The question is whether we can control ourselves.